Oh my heart! I am so incredibly proud of you for tuning in for your Dr. Zach's recommended daily dose of Reddit with your host, Dr. Zach. I guess you can say you complied with my recommendation. However, it seems to have been done out of benevolence, unlike these vicious scourges on humanity that we love to call entitled people, who complied as well, but maliciously. Alright guys, anyways, if there's one thing you can depend on your Dr. Zach for, other than, your daily dose of Reddit and good recommendations to watch Daily Dose of Reddit, it would be smooth segues, because today's subreddit is r/MaliciousCompliance. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode. This story's called, "You Want All the Output of Every Command Mailed to You? Are you sure?" Okay. A new project manager was assigned to our team, and this guy was an incredible piece of work. He was an older guy who had never worked with server-side computers before, but figured since we were all young, he knew better. At some point, we were discussing how we weren't alerted of something because the output of the program, the very verbose Java application, went dev null, which is shorthand in the Unix world of take the output and dump it into a black hole, never to be seen again. A lot of superfluous information is sent to dev null. Well, the project manager said he wanted everything to be saved, and moreover, he wanted to be emailed these logs so he could go over them and point out what he missed. In the meeting, we then tried to explain that this was a bad idea, but this just made him certain that we were up to something and he was gonna catch us at it. So one of the guys changed how dev null worked. He made it an alias that mailed the project manager instead. Everything. Junk output, logs, you name it. This was changed on just 10 systems. We had over 40. But it was sending the project manager at least 10 to 12 emails a minute of about 4 to 5 kilobytes each. We had to set up a separate server just to queue the mail and parse it out to him. Within a few hours, his mail quota was reached. He was filing them in another folder via a filter at first, but that didn't work for long. He couldn't even get his real mail. He called corporate IT first, who didn't know what was going on, but assumed he was downloading huge files. It took them over 3 days to figure out, hey, this guy's getting a crap ton of mail from the inside. So they contacted us, and we pointed out that he requested this. So they upped his quota. It was maxed out within 20 minutes. So they upped it again, and again. Finally, the project manager's machine crashed because his hard drive filled up. The mail was bouncing, of course, and when it did, it logged that as well. Eventually, the email server we were using to send him, and just him, mail crashed due to lack of space. Then we changed dev null back, because enough mail was queuing on that special server to send him 1 to 2 pieces of mail every second for up to a week. Well, the project manager thought we did that deliberately to hide what we were really doing, and he brought it up to our boss for reprimands. The boss knew what dev null was used for. He smirked at us and said, "Don't do that again, you guys." And then he explained to the project manager that his job was to manage projects, not to tell the programmers how to do their actual job. This led to a huge fight where the project manager was sent home early, sulking. Later, that project manager was transferred to our offshore team, and was later fired for openly complaining about them using racial slurs. Wow. As Zangief said in Wreck-It Ralph, just because you are a bad guy does not mean you are a bad guy, or whatever he said. You get the gist of it. That guy shouldn't have been fired for that's messed up. Wrongful termination case right there. Money, money, money. This story's called Write an Apology to My Brother's Bullies? Okay, grabs the source. So as a younger lad, I went to boarding school in the UK. Mine was quite something. Kind of like Hogwarts, just without the magic. Now for the uninitiated, boarding school is basically like prison but less stabby. Back then, in the late 90s, we were just coming to the end of older kids are in charge, and we were beginning the era of whiny little Richard heads mouthing off. Anyway, by this time, I was a 6th former, 17, 18-year-olds, and my younger brother was in the same house, boarding house equals prison wing, and a 4th former, a 13, 14-year-old. At boarding school, there's a pecking order, and if you're a 4th former, you're on the crap end of the stick, and at the beginning of Dookie Creek with a paddle that's made of poo. The sixth former tells you to jump, you don't even ask how high, you go for the world record. That being said, I wasn't one of those sixth formers. I'd been through the crap as a younger kid. I'd have the ever-living crap beaten out of me a few times. I'd run dozens of menial errands and faced my own fair share of bullying for my own year. I'd tell people some of the stories and watch their faces go white. But it's the crucible in which I found my confidence, my nicely balanced FU attitude, and my absolute hatred of bullies. Screw bullies. Unfortunately, my brother wasn't rolling with the punches, so to speak. His housemates were gargantuan twats, but my brother never just became comfortable being himself. He always tried to be their friends, and as such, they kept at him. I tried to help, but he always begged me not to. So I went on for the whole year. Nothing bad, compared to the crap I went through. He was never beaten, electrocuted, etc., etc., but it was taking a toll on him. It was grinding him down. He just wanted to be friends, and these crude name for female reproductive organ-esque self-pleasure stains just kept at him. So it's the second to last day of the year. The last day is usually just a half day, and then the families come and collect us. And my brother is just done. He calls mom and asks just to be picked up a day early. Why endure another 24 hours of inescapable verbal bullying? Well, at some point in the afternoon, my mom walks into my room and says these freaking garbanzo bags have continued bullying him in front of my mother. She's in the dorm helping him get his stuff together, and these guys are throwing barbs across the room. Mom's urinated. Well, now I am too. I've stuck to my word to my brother and kept out of it, but now these mother lovers are crossing the lines. Not only that, but one of these kids is not even from our house. He's just come into my house just to mess with my brother in front of my mother. So, I follow mom to the dorm. Now, the main culprit of the year of bullying is this kid, Bully 1. He's exactly the kind of bully you'd expect. He's taller and fat, but that prepubescent fat translates to strength at that age. Bully 2 is an almost embarrassing cliche in as much as he's the smaller mouthy type that uses his fat buddy to hide behind. They're both from rich Chinese families from Hong Kong. This comes into play later. So I stride into the dorm and spot Bully 2, the little turd from another house. Before I continue, I feel like I should point out that I was far from an intimidating specimen on paper. 150 pounds and a bit of fluff on my face. I'm not some mutant with a hairy back, but like I mentioned, I faced a fair amount of crap and I'm not afraid to mix it up. I grab Bully 2 by the scruff of his shirt, pull him out of the dorm, push him against the wall, take his skateboard and place it across his neck, and then ever so directly inquired just exactly who he thought he was. Disrespecting my mother like that? Well, Bully 1 wasn't happy about that. Figuring he was almost the same height as me and probably tipping the scales in his favor, he decided to get in my face. A massive no-no as far as the unwritten rules of the school goes. And then, the Mickey Ficky swings at me. I'm standing next to my mother and this entitled bully swings on me. His extra weight meant his hands weren't particularly fast, and I jerked my head to the side and his knuckle kissed my cheekbone. The other fourth formers actually gasped. I'll never forget that. I touch my cheekbone and calmly ask, Bully 1, did you just hit me?
Yeah, I freaking did. What are you gonna do about it?
I'm glad he asked. At this point, I decided to show him just what I was gonna do about it. So I grabbed him by his throat and proceeded to roundhouse that little frick in his face. It was a glorious sound. Smack! That crisp sound of clapping your hands together. But why stop there? Let's give him a round of applause, shall we?
Smack! 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 Smack!
And smack! At this point, one of the younger brothers of a fellow sixth former friend of mine jumps between us saying he's had enough. While I still debate that point, I acquiesced and left Bully 1 blubbering on the floor and walked off with my family as mom patted me on the back with a, "Well done." Now, we aren't stupid. We walked straight to the housemaster's office. He wasn't there. He was umpiring a cricket match against another school. So we hop in the car and drive to the other side of the school. Hogwarts, remember? This place was 100 acres. And once there was a break in the game, I stride out onto the pitch and immediately say, Sir, I just walloped Bully 1 for a bloody good reason. At this point, I can see Bully 1 staggering down to the pitch while being supported by a housemate. He's even put a band-aid on his face. He's really milking it, but suddenly spots me and my mom talking to his only salvation, and he knows he's rumbled. Now, boarding school isn't necessarily about the rules. It's about justice. So many things get dealt with in school, and you wouldn't believe the crap that never got back to the parents. They weren't ignorant of the bullying my brother was receiving, but they were going with the whole, let's see if this works itself out approach. They wanted us to learn to stick up for ourselves, blah 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 blah. However, a sixth former delivering a multitude of roundhouses to a younger boy's face is not something you can hide from parents paying tens of thousands of pounds a year. So I was let go, but the issue was not done. Back at school the next term, and the parents of both boys want blood. The headmaster was relatively new at the school and was, to put it mildly, also a crude name for a female reproductive organ. He wasn't about the old ways and was a Richard about many things. He found a casual way to bring it up in conversation to me about how there had to be punishment. I agreed. I don't think he was expecting that. But I continued. I'm more than willing to accept a week's suspension for what equated to 2 minutes of bullying. If, oh crap, there's an if, you also punish the bullies of my brother. And they were doing it for a year, so I guess you'll have to suspend them for a few years. Cue some very British muttering, and suddenly it seems like this is one of those times where it's getting swept under the rug. Clearly not. There must have been some behind-the-scenes negotiations with the parents, because a few weeks later, I was told that I would need to write a letter of apology to the parents of Bully 1. Oh, really? Now, as I mentioned, both of these kids were from Hong Kong, but also Chinese. English is not their first language, and their parents' understanding of it was significantly less. The thing is about us Brits, we're really good at sounding like we're saying one thing, while at the same time sinking the knife in with a smile on our face. I decided to follow this instinct with gusto. I sat down with one of my friends and a thesaurus and wrote what I still regard to be one of my finest pieces of work. We deliberately used overcomplicated terms to mask what was in no way whatsoever an apology, but it sounded like one. While it was littered with terms that sounded apologetic, to any native English speaker, it was clearly putting 100% of the blame on the crappy little crotch goblin they produced, while at the same time, suggesting if he does it again, he'll be getting more of the same. I signed off, and then I couldn't resist a postscript. Postscriptum, I do hope Bully 1 didn't suffer any permanent injuries. Which of course is fluent British for, I sincerely hope it freaking hurt when I smacked your son in the face repeatedly. I sealed that envelope like you seal away toxic waste. I could not run the risk of the school reading it because I'd be totally rumbled, and placed it on my housemaster's desk. But 2 days later, after lunch roll call, my housemaster singles me out and asks that I follow him to his office. Crap, play it cool. I follow along, nonchalant as frick. In we go to his office. It's about that letter to Bully 1's parents. Fornication under, consent of the king. At this point, I'm thinking, oh well, I gave it a good go. But my housemaster continues. I had it typed up for you, and hands me a pristine typed up version of my apology. I just need you to sign it. I look down, it's word for word, and right there under where I'm supposed to sign is a postscript just as I wrote it, just sitting there all by itself. P.S. I do hope Bully 1 didn't suffer any permanent injuries. You freaking legend! With a smile on my face, I gladly signed the final haymaker and had it sent on its way. Sometimes school isn't about the rules, it's about justice. Because screw bullies. Alright, and here we have a fun little edit! To appease the MMA fans and trained ninjas, I should point out that since I was a child, I have often referred to a wide looping punch as a roundhouse or a roundhouse punch. A haymaker, as many others may call it. Please don't tie yourself up in knots trying to picture some Jackie Chanian escapade, and instead, picture a skinny kid flailing his right arm about with great enthusiasm. Don't you find stories of brothers defending brothers and brothers beating up bullies of other brothers? You know, don't you find those charming? I find them charming. They're very sweet. And this guy, no exception. Even though he's just a skinny kid flailing his right arm about with great enthusiasm. That's some good stuff. Let me know in the comments below any stories of you beating up a bully, I guess. I don't know, I'm curious. So we can celebrate your heroism. This story's called, I know I authorized overtime and you worked 4 hours of it, but I'm only approving 1. Last job I had was an overall mess, but the particular manager I had wanted to try and introduce more structure or rules to the place. He had moved here from out of state, had a long resume of help desk and IT supervisory experience, and at first seemed like a decent, skilled guy. Then came the overtime policy. Previously, overtime was allowed without needing approval because sometimes calls run long as it wasn't excessive. Excessive meant more than 5 hours, and even then, all you had to do was explain what took so long and management was happy to approve it. Because sometimes tech stuff gets messy and takes a while. The previous manager never had any issues approving it, and the chief information officer never had any issues approving that approval. One of the new manager's changes was that all overtime had to be approved, and if it wasn't approved, spoiler, it was rarely approved, it meant telling a customer you had to cut a support call short when your shift was over. Terrible idea, but okay pal, I'll help you dig that grave for yourself. I ended up getting a call about an hour before my shift ended, and it was a call that was a bug in our software that was fixed by a particular Windows update. The clinic closed at 5:30, and the office manager asked us to do it after hours. I talked to the manager, he gives me written authorization to work late and get the Windows updates to run on 30-some computers. I do that, and it takes roughly 4 hours, as the clinic's internet connection started to bottom out if I had more than 4 or 5 remote sessions going at one time. No big deal, I get it done, submit my time punch for that day, and think nothing of it. He calls me the next morning with,
I can't approve this much overtime. CIO would never authorize it.
I remind him he authorized overtime for this, and that he knew it was one of the larger clinics. He says,
well, you should have just started some, clocked out, checked on them, then clocked back in when others were ready. You didn't need to babysit them. I'll authorize 1 hour.
I explained to him that that's a stupid idea, and that it's not legal to not pay me for time worked when he authorized that time and I have it in writing. He says he doesn't care and I'm only getting 1 hour of overtime authorized. Fine. From now on, I will clock in at exactly 8 a.m. and out at 5 p.m. He snaps a,
good, that's the policy,
at me and I leave. Instead of reporting him to the chief information officer, who I was on friendly terms with, right away, I spent a few weeks collecting things, like really annoyed doctors and clinic staff, and every time they got understandably angry that I was dropping a call when the issue wasn't resolved, I'd apologize and tell him that it was manager's fault, as it was a policy he implemented, and not only is it illegal for me to keep working without the company paying me, as I was an hourly employee, I flat out wasn't going to work for free. I suggested they email the CIO and CC the manager on it, telling them exactly what they thought of the new policy and how it affected their practice and their patients' opinions of the clinic. About a week later, the CIO paid a surprise visit and wanted to speak to me. He asked me what on earth was going on. He was getting all these peaked off emails from clinic sites saying the techs were dropping calls immediately at 5 p.m. CST, regardless of what time it was at the clinic or if the issue was fixed or not, and they all said the same thing about it being manager's policy. I explained the policy to the CIO, also told him about the overtime incident, and he just lost it. Got up, opened the door to the empty office he was using, and yelled across the whole IT floor for the manager in question to get his booty in here right now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.